this is a challenge that you have to face. And people that thrive and grow, if you will, are people that look at challenges as opportunities to rise above. I'm going to be the best amputee that I can be.
On this episode, we welcome in David Hiler, a hospitality expert by trade, but someone who is here to challenge us to ask some of the most difficult questions to answer around our growth. David's story not only encourages us to assess how we measure growth and success, but it insists that we establish clarity around what matters most, how we create a life for ourselves that honors that, and how we ready ourselves to adapt to what life throws at us so we don't lose sight of the life that aligns with our true definition for success. Hello there, and welcome into the most recent installment of the Growth Ready podcast. Really looking forward to an opportunity to speak with and get to know much more about the story that is David Hiler on the show today. And David, I'm always excited to hear that folks have listened to a few episodes before they join the show, as you share with me just before we started recording here. Yeah. And so you know, as well as anybody, that before we go any further, you have to answer the question, what does it mean to you to be growth ready?
What it means to me is to be able to adapt to anything that comes your way. And I've certainly had to do that in physical and mental ways. And it's really changed my entire mindset on living and, acting in this body and acting in this world.
I love how you took us to the context, if you will, around the answer, the mindset, the body, how you show up and how you're able to perform within life, within the world, etc. And I'm curious, it would be a great opportunity right off the bat here for us to understand why the word adapt, why adaptive is the word that, for whatever reason, resonates with you above all other words as to what it means to be growth ready.
Well, the word adaptive has become a gigantic word in my life. I lost my leg 6 years ago to cancer, and I lost it 16 centimeters above my knee. It kind of came out of nowhere. I had just gotten married, and it was, I had a growth. I'm a runner, ran a number of marathons, and that was sort of my lifeblood. My whole mental attitude was my opportunity to go run, and so I developed this smaller issue called synovial chondromatosis, which is a cartilage breaking off in your knee. I had tons of cartilage, which was my secret weapon as a runner, and yet it broke off in the knee occasionally, and little bits would form, and it looks like I had a golf ball lodged in the side of my knee. They were like, it's benign, don't worry about it, no big deal. And then I started developing softer tissue, and they said, it's probably the same thing. It's probably related. Don't worry about it. If it gets bigger, turns blue, starts to hurt, give us a call. And in the meantime, I got married, and, I was actually tailoring my pants a little bit because it was getting bigger.
Oh, wow.
And a couple months later in 2019, I said, look, this is a grapefruit at this point. We need to figure this out. And my doctor said, well, I'm going to send you to an oncologist. It's not cancer, but I'm going to send you to an oncologist to check it out. And I did that, and they were like, yeah, this is cancer. So I was like, oh, wow, that's a bummer. And so this is around Thanksgiving, so the holidays, all this stuff. So we really couldn't talk about it much with my family because we weren't sure if it had spread to, this is my wife and I, if it had spread to the rest of my body, and that would change how we were going to approach attacking it. And so on January 2nd of 2020, I went in and said, he said, it's not in the rest of your body. It's isolated to the knee, and you have an opportunity here to fight it. With chemo, radiation, we're going to take it all apart. We're going to remove your kneecap. We're going to cut all those tendons. And, you're going to get, this is my doctor was great. He said, he's like, you're going to get a lot of infections. Those things don't go back together. You're going to walk again. It'll grow hair. You're not going to run. You're not going to do the things you love to do. Or he said, you can take it off right there. One fell swoop, no chemo, no radiation. You can run, jump, bike, whatever you want to do, with prosthetics. He said, and I quote, "You're going to be the poster boy for amputees." And so I was like, well, geez, you put it that way. And so we said, okay, let's do it. And he said, come back in 2 weeks and we're going to do it. And I was like, wow, that seems fast.
Yeah.
So we said, how about a third week? And he's like, great. And this is where the whole mindset starts happening, because I was like, all right, I'm going to take a week to say goodbye to this leg that has, I've just done so much on this left leg, my running was so important to me, and biking and running with my dog and hanging with my kids and snowboarding and, kayaking and surfing and all those things that now I was questioning whether or not I could do. So we took this week and we did all those things and just went back in on January 21st and, they took my leg off. Oh. And the timing is such, if we're doing the math here, 6 years ago in 2020, January 21st, literally less than a month later, was COVID. Yeah. And so now I'm recuperating, in this total shutdown time. I have 4 active businesses, a restaurant, a brewery, a craft beer bar and a campground that my partners and I owned. And I'm shutting those down. While on crutches and drugs and trying to, keep my head up. Yeah. So it was, it was truly a time to adapt. Yeah. So that's a long answer to your question, but yeah.
Well, it's a relevant answer. Yeah. It may be long, but it was jam-packed with relevance to this conversation. And I have to make sure I heard you right. Not only were you going through this in COVID, but did you say that those companies that you're running, for the most part, so when you said you were shutting them down, you just meant for the time being, not like for good, right?
We were shut down for COVID. Yeah, it was, we had to close down one of them I was literally crutching in, and we were trying to do food to go. We tried to set up a to-go business. The brewery I had was only draft. So, nobody wants kegs in COVID because all of these businesses are shut down. Yeah. So we are now trying to, take funds, beg, borrow, and steal to buy a canning line so that we could actually can the beer to start putting it in stores. So it was just a ton of adapting.
Yeah. Wow. So I absolutely want to go there, and I appreciate that further context on that, because for me, what is, there's two sides of this that I'd love to learn more about. One is the adaptive qualities that you had to utilize based on circumstances that were very much forced upon you. But before we get to that, I also just want to go back and say, can we look at David prior to that moment and maybe just say, where within that did you feel, where within your journey up to that point did you feel as though you had built the adaptive qualities so that in that moment you could be, from what it sounds like, pretty quick to decision. Like you made a decision there that some people would say, hey, before I make a decision, I really want to go away and think this through. And it almost sounded like, from the way you gave us that story, that once presented with those two stories of the chemo and the processes that come with recovering from cancer that way versus the amputation, it sounded like you came to that decision quite easily. And so with that being said, I'm just curious, what was it about your journey up to that point where you knew you had the adaptive qualities to be able to handle what it was that was going to be coming on the other side of that decision?
It's a great question, and it's a question people ask me a lot, because a lot of people say, you didn't want to, give it a shot. You didn't want to try to see, if you could save it. And, people always hear you'll never walk again. And they're like, I walked again, and then I ran, a 50-mile, but it really didn't seem like I don't think I knew I had those adaptive qualities. I saw myself up to that point as a reactive person, and somebody that just, it comes at you and you do it. And that's, the hospitality business is filled with people like that. We we're ready to do anything it takes at any moment in the business because it's just coming at you. You can make your to-do list every day, which I did every single day, to-do list. And I would hope at the end of the day, I could look back at that list and cross off 2 or 3 items. I wasn't doing it in any order. It came at me, I did it, and then I hoped that I could remove a few items.
Right.
And of course, then I added 10 more, and and that's how that business works. It's full of ADHD people, and I love that kind of energy. I love just going and going and going. And so, in that moment, it was sort of something where, like I said, I realized I had this ability to say, okay, this is the right decision and this is the right thing to do. And I'm not just reacting here. I'm saying, I want to tackle this challenge, right? Because that's what it is, right? Where, this is a challenge that you have to face, and people that thrive and grow, if you will, are people that look at challenges as opportunities to rise above, right? I'm gonna be the best amputee that I can be. I'm gonna do that because I don't want to be the best person that has to limp now the rest of my life with a leg that isn't me.
Right.
This isn't me. What I wear is not me. I don't look at it as my leg, but I look at it as a tool that does all the things that I want it to do. And if it doesn't, I try to make it do the things that I want it to do. How can I make this do the things that I want to do?
Okay.
Did that answer your question?
It not only answered the question, it created about 7 more, but in a wonderful way, And so, because what I'm hearing is, firstly, that recognition of you being much more reactive prior to that point, and to be able to have that ability to shift into adaptive.
Right.
Definitely want to learn a little bit more about that part of your evolution, just simply as a person. But I think what came out of what you just shared with us, more above everything else, is the clarity that you had with being the best version of yourself.
Right.
Like the decision came down to that. It didn't come down to which one of these processes is going to be more, it is going to give me the chance to come out of it with some version of healing, a story, or whatever it might be that resonates with what maybe everybody else would consider as the right decision, or what everybody else would consider the thing to do in this moment. You simply stopped and said, what from this decision makes the most sense to allow David to simply show up as the best version of himself every single day.
And there's and I struggle saying it without getting emotional every time, but was a specific point in that conversation with the doctor where I wanted to, every year my wife and I take a hike on New Year's Day in Vermont, when we're in Vermont. And, we walk, up into the hills, and whether we need snowshoes or we can just hike up there, we do this hike. And I told him that's what I want to do. And he goes, take it off and you'll do that. Otherwise, he goes, I can't promise you that. And that was it for me.
What did you know about what mattered to you most that allowed that decision to be so simple? Because I'm hearing this clarity that you have with knowing yourself, knowing what matters most. Talk to us about some of the work you maybe done up to that point to feel so clear in judgment at that moment, to know, like, I know what my standards are in life. I know what matters most to me. This is actually an easy decision to make. Like, what did some of that work look like over the years to get to that version of you in that moment?
I'm going to be honest. I don't feel like I did specific work to get there. I mean, I've been to therapy. I mean, I've been divorced. I have 2 kids, and I've been through a lot of things. But again, when you're a reactive person, it's hard to sit and be, and it's hard to sit and just let things resonate and think. Meditation. Okay, I always see myself as somebody that has like the three legs, if you will, the 3 stool legs, one being your activity, one being sort of your work side, and one being sort of your emotional or your spiritual side. And I always said, I lack that spiritual side. I don't have that spiritual side. I'm not looking at myself. I get my spirituality from running, or I get from sports or from activity. And then I go do my job and I do my work. And, I lacked that. And I think this leg loss, and the cancer, that gave me that opportunity to like sit down. I mean, I think, we'll talk about it, I know, but my life has changed in the last 6 years. The growth that I've achieved in the last 6 years is, you know, by far outweighs anything I've ever done in my 61 years. So I don't know how prepared I was. I think, my businesses were successful. I achieved things that I didn't know that I could achieve. And I just kept careening into things and going, wow, I'm doing great. I'm crushing it in a lot of ways. And, I'm building on my successes and I'm getting better at this. But I never looked at how until now.
Mm. Okay. So what I appreciate about that, the three-legged stool idea, is that it sounds as though you were really sure of in that moment. Like just activity, clearly, and I say activity before business because you and I are cut from the same cloth in that regard. Like really, I go as Steve's health and wellness and fitness goes. Like even on my worst business day, if Steve's getting his workout and all that kind of thing, I can get through.
Yeah.
But the way around, believe it or not, I can have a great business day, but then get my workout done. I'm just like, Steve's not a happy camper. He's not a good guy to be around.
Sure.
So clearly 2 of those legs were just, you felt great about it. And then there's this spiritual, emotional leg that you allude to. And I would love to learn more about, before we go to maybe some of the lessons you've taken and how you've evolved in that capacity, as you were alluding to there in your growth. Why is it important for us just conceptually now to look at our life through a lens like a three-legged stool like that? Because it's easy for us to focus on one leg, really easy. So why the need for this conceptual three-legged stool? Why do you think that is something that we need to just simply all be considering at all times as we go through life?
Because as a human, I feel you're not complete if you're not actually understanding how you're getting to certain places. I felt very confused isn't the right word, but I felt very disconnected from myself. And I yearned for that. I could identify that I wasn't connected. I could identify that I didn't feel whole in myself. And I think, not to be too spiritual all about it, but I feel like, when you connect to yourself, that's really about taking the time, whether it's, sitting on top of a mountain watching the sunset, or it's about, going to, your faith or whatever it is that makes you sit and think and be, and then all those things kind of come together. Running was great for me. I'm not discounting how, and I'm sure it is for you too, when you do your workouts or whatever. I didn't run with headphones on. I ran with my dog. And that, if I was training for a marathon, that's 17 miles. The farther I went, the more I just was in my head, and everything kind of had clarity for me. So I think without that third stool, you're just not a complete human.
Yeah, it's fascinating to hear it from both sides. Of the three-legged stool encourages us to be a little bit more present in the moment, to consider things from all aspects. But what I liked about your answer was this idea of how is it through that reflection you're able to then align with the places you're trying to get to. So there's that present and there's that future component to what you're sharing with us. And as you alluded to there, like up until the moment of that prognosis, like you're sitting there saying, okay, I'm just going to go. And wherever I end up tomorrow, I'm going to know what I need to do in that moment and react and keep doing the work that I need to do. And then suddenly there's this moment where you're forced to stop, you're forced to reflect in certain ways. But in doing so, it helps you understand that maybe you have greater control than ever before on where it is you're trying to get to and the direction that you're trying to go in order to get there. And so would love to just learn more now about this chapter that you've had post amputation. And so you said earlier, the most amount of growth in the last 6 years than any of the other 61 that you've been around. Talk me through now just what have been some of those highlight moments, those highlight aha moments, if you will, of where you've noticed the growth most significantly.
I laugh because you say highlights, and I will say that there were a lot of lowlights. There was
Okay.
a lot of lowlights, and I say now that losing my leg and having cancer were not the worst part of the last 6 years. Were not the hardest parts, and
Hmm.
it the that was obviously it stopped me. I mean, my wife always says that she thought this leg, losing a leg would slow me down, and she's like, "Well, we were wrong about that." But in a much different way.
Yeah.
And the businesses were forced to change, and we had to adapt in that way. I'm trying to recover. I mean, I don't know how much you know about the hospitality industry, but you know, and I think you could see it in Louisiana. You could see it anywhere.
Mhm.
I mean, restaurants shutting down. Lack of staff, prices going up. We were in a small town in Vermont, and the staffing was brutal. We tried to shift to a model of QR codes, so that people didn't have to have full staff, and people loved our restaurant because we were so personal. That's who I
Mhm.
am. That was my side of it. Now my partners, I'm like, hey, I've lost a limb. I'm going to be recovering. I need some help. And they were like, we got you. And I was like, great. And so they shifted to this total QR code model. And then they said, we're moving to Florida. So, and I was like, yeah, I know, but we still need to be there. Somebody's got to be there. So as I recovered, I'm trying to now run this restaurant, which isn't mine anymore. It wasn't something I recognized. And, you know, it was really difficult to, face the reviews and the people coming at me saying, this sucks now. This isn't the
Mhm.
same anymore,
Yeah.
and, lack of business, prices going up, having to raise price. It was just, trying to change the menu, trying to get staff. It was just a nightmare in so many ways. And so for a couple of years, I ended up going back in. I told them I can't physically run around a restaurant all day long anymore. It's just not, what I want to do, and it's not what I'm really capable of. And that's what I ended up doing. And eventually I just said, I'm done. We, we,
Mhm.
we gotta sell. We gotta get out of here.
Yeah.
And that took, a good year and a half to sort of downsize everything. So we sold the restaurant, we sold the brewery, we sold the craft beer bar, and my partners have kept the campground.
Mm.
And but I got out of all of it. And I think it, now we get to the highlights. So that behind us, my wife and I looked at each other and we said, enough's enough. Let's get out of here. Let's stop
Yeah.
doing this. Like, we have a 3,500 square foot house. The laundry and the kitty litter is in the basement. We live on the second floor, and it's gigantic. We will literally text each other from our offices, mine on the second floor, hers in here, and say, hey, do you want to meet for lunch in the kitchen? I mean, that's
Right.
not a joke. And this is stupid. What are we
Yeah.
doing? Why do we have all this stuff? And we just got rid of it, all
Mhm.
of it, all of it. And sold the house, sold all the businesses, sold my motorcycle, everything gone. And we bought an RV, and we live in an RV now,
Wow.
and just started driving around the country.
Holy smokes. I
Yeah.
love that. Right.
And it
And
was
yeah.
amazing. It's, that's adapting. That's like,
Yeah.
I have one leg, and, I can go up and down stairs. I can do all that stuff. And, I still
Yeah.
do all the stuff, but I don't want to go up and down stairs. And, I don't always want to put it on. I don't mind being on crutches. And now I have almost everything is at arm's reach.
Mhm.
I've two stairs to go down to get out of the coach,
Mhm.
you know, and it's pretty amazing. And I get to see
Yeah.
the beauty of this country.
There's no one's approached you about the movie yet. Then I guess like there's got to be a movie here, man. Like I'm listening to all of this. I'm just
Yeah.
like you go from that to this, and I'm just like, good
Yeah.
grief. And
Yeah.
but it's all fascinating to me in the sense of like for you to open up here in responding to the first question with this need for us to be adaptive, and then for you to have this 6-year body of evidence of how being adaptive has served you so
Uh-huh.
effectively to the point where I'm hearing someone who is so clear in what they want, why they want it, how much of it they need, etc. Like these are questions that keep people up at night. These are
Yeah.
questions that people spend years trying to answer is like, what do I really want from this life? Or what do I really want my day to look like?
All right.
And I'm just curious, like if that person's listening to this episode right now and they're asking those questions consistently. What is it? What is it you've been able to do here in these last few years that have allowed you to sound as though you have certainly a great deal of clarity, more so than the average person,
Uh,
around the ability to even answer those kind of questions?
I think we are so, as a society, and maybe worldwide, we're so based on success and failure. Like when you get up in the morning and you have those thoughts about what am I going to do today, or what am I doing this week, or how am I going to approach this problem. We're so terrified of being successful or failing that we measure ourselves all the time on successes and failures. And there's a certain amount of failure in every success, and there's a certain amount of success in every failure, right? I mean, I can look at my businesses and I can tell you right now that they failed. They failed. I had to dump them. They were my retirement plan.
Mm-hmm.
That was my whole retirement plan is gone. And, I got out without debt. It's great. But now I'm back to square one. And in some ways, that's a gigantic failure. But man, I'm happier than I've ever been in my life. I'm living the life I want to live. So I think, if you approach things from a perspective of, I'm going to do what feels right in this moment. I'm going to do what feels good, and I'm going to chase that. And, that starts with that spiritual piece, right? Is being able to sit down every day. I journal. I started journaling right when I found out I had cancer, before I lost my leg, because I really want to look back and see, kind of what that was all about. And I still do it to this day, even though it's not about my leg anymore, or about cancer. And it really helps to provide some sense of clarity. Like, what am I writing about here? What's coming out of me at this moment? And that kind of helps to direct, where, where I want to go emotionally, physically. And I think just, that sense of going for it, because that's what feels right in that moment, no matter what happens. If you fall on your face, you fall on your face. And trust me, I fall on my face, literally,
Yeah. Yeah. And there's a beautiful, I'm just hearing like a beautiful, just way of living that we can abide to in that the way you practice journaling is this idea of capturing the story as we write it, but then writing the story as we want to then go and live it as well. Like there's two sides to it. It's like, yes, you're capturing what you've done, what happened, but the ability to reflect is always going to encourage you to look ahead too. And in those reflective moments, I have to assume that you can't help but think and imagine and wonder, like, hey, so where do we go next? What do we want now? Because you're using that reflective quality in that moment. We've spoken about the power of journaling on this show before. We've had actual journaling experts come on, and I think it is one of those things that, again, I get to put the mirror up. The beautiful thing about this show, David, is that it's nothing but a mirror for me. Every single person I talk to, I just get to sit here either inspired or incredibly convicted in why, how and why I need to start focusing on certain areas of me. And journaling is always one of those. The faster life gets, the more it gets dropped to one side. And that ability to slow down, to practice something like that. I want to talk on that, some of that spiritual growth that you've experienced before we get onto the topic of success, because for me, I'm someone who has his own spiritual journey, but I'm just to really hone in now on spiritual practices that you feel are true to you, because that word spirituality can be interpreted in 1,000 different ways. And so for you, when you say spiritual, what do you mean by that? And how do you specifically feel as though you're practicing it in a way that is, most near and dear to you?
Well, I'm still terrible at it. I mean, I really try, but that journaling is really the practice for me. That is my spiritual aspect. But, I don't get to go on a 17-mile run anymore. Running has been hard. And let me go back for a second too and tell you that there's a lot of like these, every day is hard. There's tough times. I mean, my wife has watched me throw this leg across the room, and many times to this day. It never gets easier to put it on. It's always weird, wonky. It doesn't work the way I want it to do to work, and there's a lot of hardships. And so sitting down with that in the mornings and saying, I'm really frustrated. I'm really frustrated, and it's just venting. And then by the end of that venting, I talk about gratitudes. So every day I finish my journaling with gratitudes, and sometimes just grateful that the sun is out and, I can go take a walk or I can go sit outside. And, but more than that, a lot of times I'm grateful for the people that support me. I'm grateful for my wife. I'm grateful that I'm healthy. And I think that is still an area of growth for me that I'd like to do more of. And I don't know if it's meditation, or where that comes from, but journaling is something that is now a practice, a habit, and it's forced at times. I'm like, you got to do it. You got to do it,
Yeah.
and you sit down and do it. And it's sort of like going to the gym or working out. It's like,
Yeah.
I don't want to go. I don't feel good. I didn't sleep well. I'm tired and I don't want to go. And I feel weird. I'm the weird guy with one leg in the gym wherever I go,
Yeah.
any gym I go to all around the country. It's like, I know you see me. I wear the shirt that says every day is leg day. No one laughs. No one ever laughs. They don't.
I would laugh.
I'm like,
I would
that's
laugh at
funny.
that.
I was like, that's
I'd come
funny.
high five you.
Yeah,
I would
you
come
can
high
come up
five
with,
you
you
for
can
that.
say, hey,
Yeah.
no one ever does. They're just
Yeah.
like, don't look at that guy.
Yeah.
So I have a level of self-consciousness, and I feel awkward, but I never, ever, ever regret going. No matter what, I end up coming home going, I'm so glad I did that.
Yeah.
And the same thing with journaling is
Yeah.
like you finish that day and you go, glad I did that. So that's still an area that I'm going to listen to more podcasts and get some better tips on finding
Yeah,
that.
well, I've got a couple to refer to you.
Yeah,
But
good.
it's nice when our guests speak a little, you become more relatable when you
Yeah.
put it that way for all our listeners, even the most committed to whatever practice, whatever habit they have in their life. They're going to have hard days. And, one of my favorite things, I've said it on stages, I say it in conversations from time to time, is this idea that when it comes to work, exercise for me, journaling is no different. Any habit's no different. Yeah. It's a lot easier to keep doing it than it is to get back into the habit of doing it. So in other words, falling out of the habit and then getting back into the habit, that's the work. That's the hard part. So the more you can fight on those days where you're tempted to break the habit, the more you're going to appreciate it in the long term, and not having to come back to it. But let's talk about success now. I made a note earlier as you were talking about the successes of your businesses to the point, and then what happened through 2020 and onwards. And it sounds as though success for you may be something that you're now considering how you may define it differently. And so help our listeners maybe understand, firstly, let's just start there before I go any further into it. But how does David Hiler define success currently, where he's at in life?
Currently, success is my wife and I being able to travel the country. I live in a 300 square foot, motor coach, tow our e-bikes, and go see national parks and visit different parts of this amazing country. And the success is, climbing a mountain in Big Bend, or kayaking through, Congaree, or, all these, while being able to still work. I work at a consulting firm for bed and breakfast and country inns. So we can be in Georgia and I'll fly to Alaska to do a evaluation. So, it's travel while traveling. And so, the success is really is honestly, not to sound corny, but it's to finding happiness in who I am on a day-to-day basis. I mean, I can truly say that I'm happy because I've let go of so much of that frustration and constant whirlwind that I was involved in.
Yeah. And you alluded to the measurable component of success earlier as well. And here you are talking about happiness as something that you not only pursue daily, but that you sound as though, for the most part, achieve daily. And we live in a world where folks don't do well with intangibles and soft skills. You can't. What's the ROI on this definition for success, David? Well, I experience happiness. Well, how do I measure happiness? How am I supposed to know whether I'm actually happy? Yeah. So help our listeners understand, or maybe not even understand, maybe create more comfort around the fact that we can, in fact, define success through something that may not be, objectively measurable, let's say, from one person to the next? Like, how have you been able to get to that point where you can, in fact, measure success through something as a softer skill like happiness?
That's a tough one.
Mm.
I think it's come naturally. I mean, again, I don't recommend this, but losing your leg is a pretty big eye opener for you better slow down and stop doing some of this crazy stuff that you do and start to, enjoy the life that you have.
Mm.
If I were to do a TED talk, my TED talk would be, don't wait till you lose your leg to start living your life. Because
Mm.
what are we here for? I mean, I think that's the real question is like, what are we doing? I did the same thing that you just talked about, those metrics. I mean, we did $5 million in sales in our businesses in 2019. And, we were running a, 32% food cost and a 35% labor cost. And, those are the things I looked at every single day, where, my P&Ls and where were the expenses high and how are we, how can we get that down? Yes, we got liquor cost down 28%. Awesome. We got to keep going with these, that's all the stuff that I measured on a regular basis. That's what I laid awake at night thinking about. And, I don't do that anymore.
Mm.
I don't have those businesses to worry about. I still have a business to worry about and I still have money to worry about. But I don't, it's, it's not a mortgage payment. It's not a, hot water heater or roof repair or painting or, fixtures going bad at the restaurant, or vendors, not showing up or whatever it is, eliminating a lot of the stuff. And I'm not saying, I think that you can run businesses, and do a ton of great stuff. It's a matter of like finding the balance between what you enjoy about life and that business.
Mm.
It's being able to make time for yourself because I didn't do that. I never went to Colorado snowboarding until after I lost my leg. And now I've been 3 times. I live in Vermont. I was like, I can get out and go to the mountain anytime I want. And I didn't. I bought a
Mm.
pass every year and went maybe 2, 3 times.
Right.
And I lost my leg and was like, I want to go to Vail. I want to
Mm.
go to Beaver Creek. Now I want to go to Breckenridge. And I
Right.
did. I went out there and snowboarded some of the best mountains in the country, because I've always wanted to do that.
It's an entire concept around the temptation of like accessibility is kind of how I'm hearing it. It's like because we know it's accessible to us, it's like we can take it for granted and we can delay it,
Right.
right? And again, this is another you can tie this into everything we've spoken about around journaling and exercise. It's like the gym will always be there, the journal will always be there. All these things are always accessible. So whenever we're ready to go do it, we'll go do it. It's always there.
Yeah.
But then for whatever reason, life keeps on going and we never really do it.
When do you choose you? When do you choose yourself? That's
Right.
the whole thing, right? Because we're always choosing everything else. And we always say we can choose us, but we don't do it. We don't do it enough. And I think that was the killer for me. I was fine. I was moving along. Everything seemed great. Business, we were crushing it. And then boom, wake up.
A question that you've provided us though is, what am I here for?
Mm-hmm.
I think that question forces you to do the work that we're talking about here.
Right.
If you avoid that question, some of these realizations that you've just shared with us, they're much more difficult to achieve because we're not asking the hard enough question. We're not asking the right question that's going to solicit that type of thought and reflection. And so I think that right there, when I ask around this concept of happiness being the target, let's say the way that we define success, something that we may find hard to measure, it's a lot easier to measure when you're asking that question on the front end of what am I here for?
Right.
Because hopefully in that answer, there will be some evidence of what happiness may look like for you, what fulfillment may look like for you, what purpose may look like for you. And suddenly now that becomes the direction that you're working toward, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think it's a matter of choosing yourself and choosing what you want to be and where you want to be doing it. And again, I somebody asked me after we sold the restaurants, it was a great run, and I felt we did it for 13 years, and we were crushing it. People still ask me to this day, what happened? Why aren't you? I wish you were still here. It was so fun. It was 200 seats, and we had live music, and we had great beer, and we had great food, and it was sitting on the water, and a train behind us. I mean, that train would come through, and every single time I'd be like, the train's here. I love the train. It was just such a great vibe, and when it was going, it truly made me happy. I liked that, but the pressures of it and all the other stuff. So my point is basically, I think you can have a successful company, but I still didn't have the balance. I still didn't take the time for myself. I still made everyone else and everything else the priority over the things that really truly fulfilled me. I play music, which is the other, part of that stool, and maybe part of that spirituality for me. I play guitar. And when I lost my leg, this guy I was talking to about, I didn't want to take a lot of painkillers, and this guy I was talking to, he's like, well, he said, you play guitar, right? And I said, yeah. And he's like, that's the best painkiller ever. And I was like, it is? I was like, because this thing's like screaming, this leg.
Yeah.
And he's like, yeah, trust me. And so I was playing guitar, forgot all about it. Like your mind, can heal anything. And I would forget all about that immense pain of losing my leg while I was playing. And I thought, man, that's fascinating to me,
It is.
So,
I love that. And really the coach that I am is dying to ask this question now, because I think this is really the hardest part of everything we've spoken to. Is this is all well and good when you've created the lifestyle that you and your wife have to protect this way of approaching life. But that is kind of where I want to finish our conversation and ask this question is, how do we continue to protect everything that you're alluding to here? Like, how are you, David, protecting yourself from potentially going back to the temptation of all of those other ways that you used to live life, all of those other ways that you used to define and measure success? What is it about the way you're having to structure your life today to protect you from the temptation to potentially go back to that sort of way of living?
Somebody asked me a question after when I sold the restaurant, and they said, would you ever do that again? And I said, well, the bar starts at a wine bistro in Amsterdam, and it goes down precipitously from there.
Yeah.
And I think, it's the same thing with our house, 100 square feet of house, full attic full of stuff from like my high school days, my college, my time in Europe, all sitting in boxes for 20 something years. And it's all gone, I mean, mementos, we saved some stuff, but for the most part, it's all irrelevant, right? So I will never have a huge house again, ever. It just isn't going to happen. Never going to fill up a house with a bunch of stuff. I'm never going to have a restaurant and a craft beer bar and a brewery and a food truck and a campground ever again. I don't need a legacy. I don't need to build a legacy. I need to do things that fulfill me and make me happy. If I could get a wine bistro in Amsterdam and take my boat into work every day, I'm there. That sounds great. So I think it's creating scenarios. Like, I think when I started the restaurant operation, when my partners and I started it, we set out to do this really cool restaurant. And then we were like, hey, we need to get an external brewery. Let's get, we're selling tons of beer. Let's get this other brewery. So we had a 15-barrel brewing system. And then we're like, we're only selling our beer. We need to sell like other beer. So let's have this craft beer bar. And, we need a campground. And it just like, I didn't set out to have a legacy. We just kept thinking that's what we need to be successful, right? Like, we need to have this monumental thing that everybody goes, wow, look at those, moguls. And I look back and I go, I didn't want that. That's not what I wanted.
Something that I want everyone to hear in that response is, if you don't get success right, if you don't define it correctly, we're going to be telling ourselves that we need things that we don't actually need. Like that's what I'm hearing there.
Yeah.
Like, that is so good, man. Like, this idea that success wasn't necessarily the way it needed to be defined for you to be your most fulfilled, your most happy as you are now. And because of that, there's this incessant need to keep identifying what we now need next,
Mm-hmm.
and to do the work on the front end of what does success look like? How do I answer the question with conviction of what am I here for? What is best for me? And if I do that first, it should get really simple about what I do and don't need from that point on.
Right.
There should be much greater simplicity in that process moving forwards.
Right. And, letting go of ego is huge because, it's like, you want the biggest and the best. You want to be the biggest and the best. And once you can let go of that and say, I just want to have something that I really enjoy that makes me feel great, and sure, make some money, have it be profitable. Great. Yeah. So
I love it. I love it. And what I enjoy, there's a lot of things I enjoy about our show, David, but what I enjoy about our conversation today is that it allows us, we move along this spectrum on this show of like, what does growth and success look like in the business world? And if that's how you're wired and that's what you're trying to build. And then we have this other end of the spectrum of the personal side. We shift up and down this spectrum, if you will, of personal versus professional.
Mm-hmm.
And what I think you've allowed us to do through your story is understand that we can experience both, but we just have to make sure we're asking the right questions. Whichever world we're in, if we're asking that right question and we've got success figured out in terms of truly what it means to us, then no matter where we move along that spectrum, we should at least be able to align with, hey, am I doing what's best for me? Am I doing what's best for me? Am I doing what's best for those that matter most to me? No matter where I'm operating in, no matter what season of that world that I'm operating in as well.
And doing it regularly, I think you brought it up earlier, it's the habit. It's like you've got to, make sure that you've got the habit. You're asking yourself that question every day or regularly at least, like checking in with yourself. Because when you're in the middle of it all, you don't check in with yourself, do you? You're just like careening, or at least that was me.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure. David, it's such good stuff. And
thank you, Steve.
Typically I would say at this point, like, hey, where can we learn more about you and all this kind of thing? And like, but now I almost want to be like, hey, can we follow your RV around? Where are you going to be at, man? I feel like you should have your own little, do you have like an Instagram thing where you tell us where you're at or what? How do we follow you, brother?
We do an Instagram post every month, and I say we. It's really my wife, and she lets me be a collaborator on it. But we do. It's always too long. I get to kind of help her edit it. It's about 3.5 minutes long every single time. But on my Instagram is at David Hiler, and we do of that month everywhere we went and all the kind of stuff we've been doing. But I'm just if I could do a plug, it's for the So Everybody Can Move movement, which is something where I'm trying to give back. I've been blessed to be, so many people went to bat for me. I have 4 different legs and running blades and snowboard legs, none of which you can get through insurance. And so we're fighting for legislation all over the country right now to get medical providers to insurance companies basically to insure a running blade or a snowboard leg or a water leg. I mean, people can't even get water legs to take a shower with your leg on. So that's the kind of thing. So everybodycanmove.org that we're working towards. And I'm really excited about in my travels to kind of help different states get that legislation enacted. So
I'm so glad that you mentioned that on the back end. We're going to definitely get more information from you about that and make sure we connect that with the episode and do our part in something that this is news to me. And so I'm glad that I've now learned about this and can hopefully contribute to that in time as well.
Sure.
But I'm certainly going to be following you. I look forward to a monthly video from you and your wife. I think it's a fascinating journey and chapter in your lives that you're on right now. And more importantly, Ben, I'm just so grateful, appreciative for the generosity of you just coming in and sharing so much of this with us. There's no doubt you've inspired a few people through this episode, but at the same time, I think for me, I can only speak for myself when I say that you've given me some food for thought too. And I always appreciate that mirror being held up in a couple of ways through these interviews. So again, just thank you so much for your time and safe travels, man. Safe travels wherever you guys go.
It's been truly my pleasure, and I've actually really enjoyed getting to know you through your podcast, and looking forward to listening to more. We have a lot of time to listen while we drive, so we're always looking for good podcasts. So
sounds like I got a new subscriber. I love it.
I did.
I love it.
I'm already subscribed. So. Awesome, man.
Right,
Thanks so much, again. Steve. Really appreciate it.